Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, regardless of where you are in this beautiful world of ours. I want to welcome you to today's webinar called Building a Powerful Personal Brand. I will be your facilitator today. My name is Lita Citroen, and I am brought to you today by the wonderful folks at the National Veterans of Foreign Wars office. And I have to just put in a quick note that in the months leading up to this webinar and several other exciting programs that we have planned for you, I've really learned to appreciate all that your VFW does for you. And I hope through the course of this program and the others that we have coming up, that you really see the level of commitment in rehabilitation and reintegration and advocacy that I've learned a lot about your VFW. So I'm going to be sharing with you some of my background, some of the important features of building a personal brand, and really highlighting the best practices that I've learned in working with military for many years now. But let's get started with an understanding of a very key concept that personal branding is based on, the concept of competitive advantage. Oftentimes when we think about competitive advantage, we think about things like businesses competing against other businesses. Sometimes we think competitive advantage means as an individual, you can jump fast, you can jump higher, you can run faster, you can perform physical, athletic feats better than others. Some of us think competitive advantage means you're more outgoing, you're more personable. Sometimes we think that extroverts are competing more advantageously because they have the personality. And in some cases, we even think that competitive advantage means being loud or being bold. Well, I'm going to share with you today what competitive advantage really means. It means you have a powerful reputation. Your reputation is what precedes you. Your reputation is what civilian employers, hiring managers, recruiters, and colleagues will learn to believe about you. And that's what we're talking about today when we talk about personal brands. Your reputation has to be clear. I'm going to emphasize it over and over in this program today that you need to be an expert on you. The hiring manager, the supervisor, the manager that you're trying to get the attention of does not have the bandwidth to figure you out or to understand what makes you valuable. You need to be clear about that. You need to be very intentional about the way you show up around people, and you need to build credibility. We're going to talk a lot about credibility in this program today. But above all, your reputation has to be genuine. This is not a program teaching you how to brag or how to be arrogant or be something you're not. My whole premise is that when you are yourself, you can learn through personal branding how to be the best version of yourself. And these tools are going to make you much more empowered wherever you are in your transition. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. I came to this conversation actually in November of 2009. I had left my corporate practice in a year earlier, where I made my living helping big companies, large nonprofits, and very, very senior executives position themselves, get in front of the market, tell their story, help gain competitive advantage by positioning themselves as unique and compelling. Well, I started my own business in 2008, actually in a terrible economy, if you remember 2008. But the marketplace was ready for what I had to offer because, again, I was teaching professionals, corporate professionals, how to position themselves competitively against those who were competing for resources. Well, in 2009, I learned that no one is teaching you, the veteran, these same principles. No one is helping you understand how to position yourself against fellow veterans, but also against civilians like myself who are good at this. So I wanted to help, and I knocked on a lot of doors. The first door that actually opened was a program that is run in Philadelphia by General Peter Pace, who helps service-disabled veterans transition into Wall Street jobs. General Pace and his program graciously allowed me to come to Philadelphia and teach my first personal branding workshop for veterans in transition. That was early 2010. And I remember clearly walking into that room the first day with my PowerPoint and my handouts, thinking it was going to be like any other corporate branding program that I would teach on a daily basis. but I was met with the reality that the veteran experience is very different, especially taking the uniform off and transitioning into a civilian career. So that was an awakening for me as a civilian with no military connection about 7 years ago. In the time since that first class, I've done a lot with this passion. My program has been taught, I've traveled all over the world actually, teaching veterans how to build their personal brand, how to become more competitive. I write for military.com, a wonderful partner of the VFW. Every week, I publish articles about transition for veterans and for employers that are looking to hire you. In 2014, my book came out, which you can see on the screen there, called Your Next Mission, a personal branding guide for the military to civilian transition. And in that book, I learned from the companies like Disney and USAA, General Pace, and many others who shared their insights about how that transition looks and how we can help you better reintegrate into a civilian career that's meaningful and productive and gives you that sense of success and duty that you had in uniform. So you can find me online. I'm very active. I put out a lot of information trying to help make this transition smoother for you. Whether you left your military career a week ago, a year ago, or 10 years ago, just because you transitioned 10 or 15 years ago does not mean your transition has been successful. Many of the veterans that I work with and have coached have told me that they transitioned out before 9/11 and they're still struggling. So we tend to think of veterans as post 9/11 or Vietnam era, but I would like to include all of you who've put on the uniform for one day in this conversation of being more empowered, being more confident, and helping to drive a career that's intentional for you. So here are some of the things that I have found in the years that I have been working with your community. The first is that as a civilian, I have no trouble telling you what makes me great, what I'm proud of, my successes and accomplishments. I am happy to list those for you enthusiastically and confidently. But when someone asks a veteran to tell them what makes them great, that's often a very difficult answer because there's a feeling that veterans tell me they have when asked to talk about themselves that feels like bragging. It feels like you're taking the credit of service of those who worked alongside of you. Service before self, the military value and culture, support a desire and a training that you take recognition, you take responsibility and you take accountability, but you don't take recognition for yourself. You don't take credit. And that is a phenomenal value set that the military promotes, but it's not necessarily a value set that is promoted on the civilian side. So a hiring manager who says, Joe, tell me what makes you great, gets confused when Joe responds by talking about his platoon or his unit or things that his fellow troops did. Because that hiring manager isn't looking to hire all of them. They're looking to hire Joe. And so it's a disconnect. There's a phenomenon of command and control that doesn't translate very well into the civilian world. I'm coaching a senior military officer right now who's really struggling since taking the uniform off and working in the private sector. And he shared with me some examples of recent struggles that he's had. He said, Lita, when I was in uniform, I would walk into a room, and first of all, everyone stood up because I was an officer. I was a senior officer. I would walk into the room, they would stand up. If I had a directive or an initiative or a mission to lay out, I would go around the room and I would tell everybody what they needed to do. And then I would ask if there were any questions. If there weren't questions, we dismissed and everything got done. Getting from point A to point B in the military was very efficient and effective. He said, now, as a civilian manager, I'm being told by my supervisors that I need to get buy-in, that I need to form collaboration initiatives with my department. He said, I walk into the room and they don't stand up. Some of them are on their phones when I walk in. And I have to be concerned about how they feel about the projects I am asking them to support. He said, this makes no sense. It feels very ineffective and very inauthentic to me. And I had to remind him that A command and control style is not necessarily the civilian style. We're driven by profit, by meeting certain goals and deliverables, but the experience of how we get there is very important in the civilian side. The relationships that are formed, the camaraderie, the collaboration, the buy in are values that civilian employers hold dear. So it isn't just about getting from point A to point B as quickly and effectively as you can. It's really about the experience of getting there as well. And for some of you, that might feel very different from what you're used to in the military. The concept of networking is one I have a lot of fun talking to military veterans and active duty service members about. You see, in the civilian world, who you know and how they know you is a big part of how we advance our careers. I remember a few years ago, I had the honor of speaking to about 500 active duty Marines at Quantico. And I talked about personal branding, and then I hit on the importance of networking. And I could visibly watch the color drain from their faces as I talked about basic networking principles. One of the young gentlemen in the front row raised his hand and interrupted and said, "Excuse me, ma'am, but with all due respect, when you talk about networking, is that thing where we have to make small talk and shake hands and exchange business cards and connect on LinkedIn?" And he kind of snarled his face as he was asking me this. And I looked at him and I said, "Yeah, that's pretty much it. So can we move on?" Networking goes back to what I said earlier. It's about the relationships. In the civilian world, who feels strongly about you, who will champion and advocate for you, the perception that other people have of you and the relationships that you have are a big part of how we get hired, how we get promoted. It is a cultural difference that has to be pointed out. So we're going to talk about networking, even though we have a whole program on networking coming up later this year. The online tools, using social media, using social networking to build your career are something that civilians have grown up with, but your community hasn't. Many of you took big chunks out of your life to go serve your country. And some of the technology advancements that we use to build relationships aren't part of your everyday discourse. So I'm going to help highlight those and the importance of social networking, because it's something that I want to make sure you don't make mistakes, but I also want to show you how these tools can be more valuable for you. What if I told you you could actually choose who you want to work with and work for? Would that interest you? I thought so. Target audiences are where you get to pick. You get to pick who you work with and what you know about them and how you build relationship with them. It's a whole different strategy and approach to building relationships with more focus and intention. And we're going to cover all of that in just a moment. And finally, I want to talk about the uniform. I recently did a TED Talk where I was able to share my experience as a civilian working in your community. And I think the part that I didn't appreciate until it was really made clear to me was how significant it is to wear your entire career history right here. Everything you've done, everything you've fought for, every sacrifice and commitment you've made in your military career is demonstrated and displayed on your uniform. When you take that off, you feel a sense of loss because you go from being Lieutenant Colonel Chris Smith, United States Air Force, to being Chris Smith, job applicant. And when you walk into a room, there's no status, there's no immediate hierarchy, and that can feel really painful. I want to acknowledge that because I appreciate how different that is. There's also no uniform on the civilian side. You have no idea when you see somebody standing in line for a cup of coffee if they're the CEO of the company or they just graduated college and they're starting their career. You really can't tell by what somebody wears. And I think we often underestimate the impact and significance that a uniform has when transitioning from a military to civilian career. There are also some disconnects I've learned in what the employers are looking for. I work very closely with major companies and small businesses across the United States who are looking to hire veterans. They want to bring on somebody with your character, your resiliency, your leadership skills, and your problem solving abilities. But they're focused on resumes, they're focused on experience. In a lot of cases, your resume and your experience doesn't match up or translate to what they're looking for, and that's a real problem. They're concerned about management style. They have heard rumors and media reports of a command and control, more authoritative military style, and they're not sure if that's going to work in their culture. Culture and fit are very important to civilian hiring managers. It isn't just what's on paper. It isn't just the certifications and clearances that you have. It's how are you going to fit in to my organization? What kind of a leader? What kind of a follower? What kind of a team player are you going to be? Hiring managers admittedly are challenged in hiring you. They are seeing resumes that look like an MOS. They are interviewing candidates who give one word to the point answers or are vague about their value to the company. And the hiring managers, while they're motivated to do the right thing and they're motivated to want to hire you because of what they believe to be your value, are struggling with how difficult that process is. So while I'm having this conversation with you today, I want you to know that I'm also having the conversation with the employers because they're trying. They're trying very hard to hire you. We just need to get both sides to come a little bit closer to the middle. So in kicking off today's conversation, I want to kind of wind all the way back to when you and I were these little people. And actually, I was probably that really tall girl in the back. If you know me and you've met me in person, you'd know why. But when we were little people, we had a sense of identity that was our own, right? Our way of defining who we were and what we saw as our life and what we were going to be in this world really kind of came from our own imagination. I remember growing up in Southern California, I used to like to dress in those big snow boots. Remember snow boots? Moon boots, they were called. In the middle of July in Southern California, in my shorts and t-shirt, I loved to wear moon boots because I saw myself as fun and outgoing and a little bit different, and I enjoyed that sense of identity. Maybe your sense of identity was tied to a vision of service or patriotism or wanting to protect and defend. Even at a young age, you might have had those ideas about who you were in the world. Well, what happens is then we start working with people. We go to school, we work with teachers, we go we go to college, we go into a career, and what happens in those experiences is people start telling us what they believe to be our identity. So you're the smart one, you're the funny one, you're the problem solver, you're the troublemaker, you're the class clown. These identities start getting laid on top of us. And oftentimes it can make it really hard to remind ourselves of how we saw ourselves in the first place. Then you put on the uniform. This is actually a picture of a very good friend of mine, Colonel Arnold Strong. And when you put the uniform on, then your sense of identity becomes your commitment to our country. Your sense of identity, your sense of self becomes intertwined with the values of the United States Armed Forces, the commitment and the sacrifices that you are making to build a reputation for yourself as a soldier, an airman, a Marine, a Coast Guard, a sailor, whatever it is. You become known as that person. Whatever channel you come into the military, whatever channel you exit the military, a lot of your sense of self-identity becomes wrapped up in how you served, where you served, and why you served. Personal branding, and what we're going to talk about today, is the process of reminding ourselves who our identity is, looking at the reputation that you've earned in the military, and combining them both to tell a story of who you are. Who you are, not just what you are. And that will make you hireable to an employer who is looking for someone like you. Personal branding is not as straight as just having an elevator pitch or a resume. It's really a career strategy. Your personal brand and your career strategy work side by side. As we build your personal brand, as we talk about how you want to be, who you want to be, we have to be mindful of that target audience that we're going to talk about really intensely in a few minutes. Because no matter how great you are, if you're not in front of the right people, if you're not talking to the right employers, it's all for naught. It doesn't mean anything. So we want to make sure that your personal brand and your career strategy work hand in hand with your target audience. Very important to have alignment of all of those. So I'm talking a lot about brand, and brand is a big word. I want to kind of break it down. Let's look at the VFW brand, for instance. A brand is just an expectation of an experience. A brand makes us feel something. A brand makes us inspired, motivated, safe. It makes us feel powerful, confident, or insecure and afraid. The VFW brand is known for many things. It's a legacy brand. How many of your parents and grandparents were part of the VFW community? The VFW of today is a brand about assistance, right? Whether it's VA claims, employment, financial assistance, it's a brand about advocacy and thinking forward. Brands make us feel something. Marketing is where we tell our audiences what to do with that brand. Get involved, click here, sign up, act now, call today. Those are marketing messages. But the brand makes us feel. And as a VFW member, your alignment and commitment to this organization comes from a sense of feeling connected to the promise of what the VFW can offer you in your community, regionally, nationally, even internationally. That's a feeling. It's an emotional connection that we have with the target audience. Well, personal branding, what we're focused on today, is actually very similar. It's a very similar model to how we build corporate brands, nonprofit brands, even product brands. It's a simple process, very simple process, but it's not easy. Admittedly, I'm going to ask you some questions today and through the course of these webinars that are going to make you a little bit uncomfortable. As I stated at the outset, you have to be an expert on you. And the only way to do that is to ask yourself those tough questions, get clarity, formulate a strategy before someone else asks you, and then you don't have an answer. So it's a simple process, but it's not easy. It's also about perception and judgment. And trust me, I understand that doesn't feel fair. It doesn't feel fair that people judge us by what we look like, what we sound like, what they see about us written online. The quality and the typographical accuracy of our resume are all touch points that people can judge us by. But judgment and perception is where you're going to get control. And I'm going to touch on that in a moment. I want to highlight this point on the screen when I say personal branding means you're not a commodity. Let me give you an example of what that means. Let's say I'm going to the grocery store and I'm looking for laundry detergent. I don't care one kind of laundry detergent or formula or delivery method from another. If I don't care, if I don't see any difference between the types of laundry detergent that are on the shelf, how would I typically buy laundry detergent? Well, if you guessed price or cost, you're right. If I don't see any difference, why would I pay more? It's the same thing. So I'm not going to pay more. I'm going to go with the cheapest one because to me, they all look the same. They all do the same thing in the same way. On the other hand, if I go down that laundry detergent aisle and I spot that orange container, and I'm immediately reminded of my mother doing laundry when I was a young girl growing up in California, and the look of pride that she had because she used Tide, and Tide made her feel like a good mother. And I want my children and my husband to go out into the world confident, knowing that I did the best job I could to get their laundry as clean as it possibly could be. And I hear God Bless America playing in the background as I reach for Tide. There is no comparison. Now, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but the point is, in my mind, I'm not going to compromise the confidence and the love of my family for a few dollars. I will spend more money to buy Tide because to me, I have an emotional belief system that says this is more important. This is better for my family. This will make me a better mother. Again, beliefs, not necessarily fact. Now let's compare that to people. Let's say we have two candidates going up for the same position, Bob and Jeff. going for the same position, and Bob and Jeff have resumes that almost look identical. Their backgrounds, their certifications, their military career, their credentials look almost identical on paper. But there's something that we know about Bob. See, in the interview, it was really easy to talk to him. He got my jokes, he understands our company culture. People that we know him say that he's a leader, that he is thoughtful and mentors the people that work with him. He goes above and beyond to help them get where they're going in their careers. We don't know that about the other candidate, but we've heard that and we got a sense of that when we met Bob in person. That feeling, that perception will oftentimes make a hiring manager buy. They will hire the person who makes them feel a certain way simply based on perception. And oh, yeah, that person happens to cost $20,000 a year more. Well, might be worth it because we are a company about leadership. We want to grow people in our organization. And we got a sense from Bob that he will help us get there. We don't know that from the other person. Your ability to compete, your ability to differentiate yourself is where you take yourself out of a commodity lineup of everyone else who is going to look and sound like you. This is where you get to sell your value proposition. Now, I told you this is a program about control. How many of you like control? I love control. Control to me is choice. I want to choose the clients that I work with. I want to choose the organizations that I attach my name to. I want to choose how I spend my day. And I have that power and control because I'm intentional about the way I show up. And we're going to circle back to that in just a moment, so hold that thought. Personal branding is all about opportunities. It's all about being strategic. It's about taking the randomness and the hoping things will work out, crossing our fingers and just hoping. It's about taking power back. It's about being intentional and focused and strategic. You have paid your sacrifices to our country. You deserve more than anyone else to understand these tools so that you can have the choice to use them or not, to make yourself more competitive or not. But I'm going to remind you that the brand part is about the emotion. The brand part is about the feelings people have for us. And the way they feel about us, whether you like it or not, is how they will make decisions. If they feel like you're worth taking a chance on, if they feel that you will bring value, if they feel that you're going to be a problem the second I turn you over to that manager, they will make decisions based on that. That's human nature. It's not right or wrong, it's human nature. So I told you there was one formula. This is my one formula. It's a very simple formula, but it's not an easy one. And I'm going to ask you to start thinking about this. I want you to start thinking about the only way you can build credibility for a personal brand that you're going to be intentional about is this formula. You start with your values. What do you believe in? And I don't mean military values, because in some cases it's hard to separate. Your values might look like honor and duty, integrity, service, but they might also look a little different. What are your values? What do you believe in so core to your moral fiber that if it wasn't there, you wouldn't be you? And then, how do you walk the talk? The action part of the formula is usually where people get tripped up. But if you can't prove, if you can't demonstrate action consistent with your values, you can't build credibility. There is simply no way that the formula works. We're in a political cycle right now this year, and so we hear a lot of talk about values. And what consumers are getting smart and voters are getting smart about is they're saying, where's the proof? Where's the action? If you want me to trust and give you credibility and even credit for those values, you have to be able to show me that you've walked the talk. Conversely, many of you are living and acting consistent with your values. You are showing up every day, either at a job that maybe you don't like, or as you pursue a career that's more meaningful. You are showing up every day, living those values that should make you credible. The challenge is you're not doing the first part of the formula. You're not telling me why. You're not anchoring that action to values. When I first started working with the military community 7 years ago, my values were very clear. My personal brand and value set is anchored in two words: gratitude and generosity. I'm very clear on that. And the way that I wanted to pay it forward was to share my expertise with those who've put on the uniform and their families. But I had no credibility. Everybody looked at me and said, "What are you selling?" Like there was a lot of skepticism because I had no credibility. I hadn't done anything with it. I had the values, but I hadn't put action to it. So when I started working with General Pace's program and twice a year, closing my business down and going to work with service disabled veterans, when I was writing for major media outlets on my thoughts and my programs on personal branding and not getting paid for it, when I would coach veterans who would call me and say, "I'm really stuck and I need some help," and I did it without hesitation, the more I did that, and every time I did that, I said, "I am doing this because I am grateful for the service that you and your family have committed to ensuring my freedom as an American." Then I anchored my values of gratitude and generosity to my action, and I built credibility. It is a formula that there is no way to bypass. And it's not just a veteran formula, it's a formula for everyone. In order to be credible for the values that you want to be known for, you have to put action to it and you have to tell me what those values are. If you're passionate about mentoring or leadership, then as you do that work, tell people, "This is why I do this. This is why I show up. This is why I am here. This is why this job appeals to me, because this is something that I value. Here are examples of how I have done that. And that is why this opportunity makes sense for me." It's a big conversation. And I appreciate that it might be something that's tough to get your head around, but I encourage you to think about this. What are your values? Really pick those words apart, because at the end of the day, this is what you'll build a legacy around. We know veterans have many admirable values, such as resiliency. You have been tested in some of the most challenging situations any human being will ever be in, and you've risen to the occasion. You've found ways to navigate complex systems. You are values driven, right? You didn't sign up for the military because of the paycheck, most likely. You signed up because it was a set of values that you ascribed to and align with. You're team builders. There is no better and more critical situation to have to work collaboratively and as a team than in the military. You are loyal. We have seen examples, heartbreaking examples, of loyalty that veterans have displayed that most civilians are surprised by because they probably can't align with. So when you think about the values, don't just go to the obvious ones. Go to the ones that are meaningful and personal to you. In personal branding, one of the first places we put an anchor is current brand. You right now, even if you didn't know it, have a personal brand. You are known as something, as someone. You have a reputation. Another way to think about brand is reputation. So if you think about your current reputation, do you believe you are known as someone who brings value, who has something that's a differentiator, that has competitive advantage? Or maybe in the case of laundry detergent, do you look like every other veteran with a similar resume? What makes you unique? What makes you stand out? What can you bring to a conversation that no one else can, or no one else can in the way that you can? And I'm always challenged by veterans who say, "There's nothing about me that's unique." I will challenge you on that one, because there absolutely is something about you that makes you unique. And if you don't know it, you can't expect a hiring manager to know it. What are you passionate about? What are the things that you love to talk about? Whether it's hunting, fishing, sailing, math, science, the future of our economy, whatever it is, what are you passionate about? When it comes to understanding who you are today, always take inventory of your passions. Start writing lists, because the better you know yourself, the better you will help someone else understand why you're valuable. Now, I told you this was a program about control, and this is where you get control. Because regardless of how you're known today, before maybe you ever thought about this personal branding thing that this lady in the computer's talking about, before you ever knew about personal branding, you built a reputation. But I'm going to give you the tool now to design the future. And that comes in the desired reputation that you want. the end of your life, how do you want to be remembered? We're all going to get off the merry-go-round when the music stops someday, but you have right now an opportunity to design what that's going to look like, what your value proposition is going to be, what your legacy is going to be, so that at the end of your life, when we look back on what you've done in the military uniform and in your civilian career, what do you want us to know about? What do you want us to feel about the difference that you made? Mark Twain said there are two important days of your life: the day you were born and the day you realize why. Why not take the opportunity now to think about why you are here? Why you? Why are you put on this earth in this conversation right now? And what are you going to do using that information to make sure that you can intentionally and strategically design your career with that information? When you can think about the future, when you can look way off into the distance and imagine what you want to be known for at the end of your life, then you give yourself the power to start making decisions right now. In 2008, when I left my corporate career and I started my own business, this was the conversation I had with myself that changed my entire life. Because I knew I didn't want to be remembered for things I had pursued in my corporate world. I wanted to be remembered at the end of my life as someone who gave back much more than she took. And she takes a lot, trust me. I wanted to be remembered as someone who was grateful and generous with the talents and the resources and the gifts that she has. And that's what opened the door for the way that my business is structured. That's what opened the door for me to work with my military friends when that lightning bolt went off. That's what helps me say yes to certain opportunities and no to others, because I have a path and a direction of what I'm working towards. Give yourself that same gift. Take a moment, and if you're watching the recording of this video, then pause for a moment and think about, what do you want to be remembered for at the end of your life? What difference will you have made? What are you passionate about? What is your purpose? And that will help design the strategy as we move through the rest of this program. So up until now, we've talked about you, right? It's your personal brand. So of course it's all about you. Well, the issue is it's also about them too. And them is your target audience. Who does your brand need to matter to? Who will find you relevant and compelling or not? The good part is you have a lot of control over this. The not so good part is not everyone is going to get you. Not everyone is going to find you funny and charming and witty and attractive and compelling. They're just not. There are some people who are just inherently going to be turned off from someone like you. And your job is to understand who those people are, and don't waste your time marketing yourself to them. Focus on the people, the companies, the industries, the communities that are aligned with what you value and are looking for someone just like you. And maybe your target audience is a recruiter or a hiring manager or a company, or if you're already employed, perhaps it's someone who works for you or someone you report to. Who holds the opportunities to advance your career that you want? Not all the opportunities, but just the ones you want. Who are the people in your target audience that are going to hold those opportunities? That's your job to figure out. I can't tell you who your target audience is, but you need to figure out, and you might have a couple different target audiences, but who are those people to whom you need to be relevant and compelling? Then, once you've identified, let's say it's a hiring manager at a specific company, that's your target audience. Your job is to figure out everything you know about that person. And I will tell you, between you and me, as a military veteran or active duty service member, you are better qualified to do this than I am. You are better skilled to do this than I am as a civilian with no military intelligence training. You've been taught how to figure people out. Now, maybe that was in a life and death situation, and now we're talking about a job search, but you need to tap back into those skills and training to help yourself understand the people that you're going to be interacting with that are your target audience. Everybody has two sets of needs. The first thing human beings have is what we call functional needs. So if you sit in front of a hiring manager, their functional need is that you bring certain skills, certain qualifications, certain credentials to the conversation. Because if you don't have those specific ones they're looking for, then it makes no sense to move forward. If I'm looking for a warehouse manager and you're a heart surgeon, I'm proud of you, but it really doesn't make any sense for us to talk because I'm looking for a warehouse manager. So the functional needs are sort of the basic blocking and tackling of the conversation. It's the functional requirements that allow us to move to the second part of our human needs, which are the emotional. That hiring manager who is looking at you and going over your resume and interviewing you or asking you questions has emotional needs. They need to feel something through you. They need to feel safe. They need to feel important. They need to feel heard. They need to feel certain things. And it's not universal. You have to understand and do your homework ahead of time and in the interview to understand what that hiring manager needs to feel in order for them to advocate for you, champion for you, and perhaps push you through the interview process when maybe you don't even have all the skills that they need. Hiring managers will do this if you're addressing their emotional needs. This is a part of the sales process that when I do sales training, we spend a half a day just on this one question. So we're going over it a little bit quickly here, and I admit that. But if you can figure out what that hiring manager or that supervisor or that staff person that works for you needs to feel, you can then build a relationship and move to a transfer of confidential information, which is the highest form of relationship. When you think about the companies that you want to work for or work with, assuming you're not going the entrepreneur route, I just want to kind of point out there's a little difference between those companies that are just getting started and those companies that we hear about a lot in the news as being veteran committed. Veteran committed companies are the companies or organizations nationally that have built out their veteran hiring process. They have a sourcing and attracting process. They know how to onboard veterans. They've got mentoring systems and buddy-to-buddy sponsoring. They have veteran resource groups and affinity groups. They have built in all of the infrastructure to hire, onboard, and retain and grow veteran talent. They're the ones we hear about a lot. But I'd like to point out that veteran-friendly companies often don't get as much publicity, but they're a great opportunity for many of you that might be looking to make a difference and give back to your community. A veteran-friendly company might participate at a job fair. You might see a job listing online with the slogan, "We encourage former military to apply." These are companies that might just be getting started in hiring veterans. That doesn't mean that they aren't going to build out a program, but they might just be getting started. Veteran-ready companies are probably a little further along in the process. Maybe they even have 3, 4, 5 veterans that work for them that you can talk to. My point in bringing this up is not all companies are the same when it comes to the depth of resources and their commitment to hiring veterans. You might meet a company who says, yes, we want to hire veterans. We have a job opening for one person in the next year. That's still a veteran-friendly, veteran-ready company, just because they're not hiring 10,000 or 100,000 positions. So talk to them, ask about their understanding. It could be a great opportunity for you to become a veteran leader in that company to help hire other veterans behind you. One of the ways we learn about our personal brand is through the power of feedback. And I just wanted to touch on this really quickly because I think sometimes we might have a confused sense of who we are versus what that perception is. So I encourage you after this webinar, ask a few people who know you. What do they think your personal brand is? What do they think and believe makes you unique and different and special? Listen to their feedback. Remind yourself that if you ask for feedback, then you've just given yourself a gift if somebody is willing to give that to you. Now, you might not like what they have to say, but your job isn't to argue with them. If you ask, hey, Lynn, I'd love to get some feedback on what do you think I do really well on the job? And Lynn says, I think you're good at this, this, and this. Well, you don't come back and say, no, I'm really good at these other 5 things. No, Lynn just gave you a gift, and you appreciate that gift because where your current brand is and where your desired brand is might be far apart. How you are seen today and how you want to be known, there might be a gap. And by giving you that feedback, Lynn is giving you insight that help you make changes. You want to look for specifics when you evaluate feedback. You want to look for tangible specifics. You want to make sure that that feedback isn't somehow biased by, hurt feelings or some prior history with that person. I encourage you to understand that feedback, any feedback from an employer, from a hiring manager, from a best friend that helps you get better is valuable feedback. And it's a big part of personal branding. We're going to talk a lot about marketing yourself in the rest of these webinars. And I want to just touch on some of the ways that we market ourselves using this personal brand. Because if you do the work, if you understand your value proposition, then you are able to clearly articulate that value proposition through your narrative, how you talk about yourself, the relationships that you build, the way you show up online, and in person. What does your image say about you? What kind of body language do you display, which gives somebody the belief one way or another about who you are? These are the pillars of personal branding and how we market ourselves. Your narrative, which is going to be the focus of a webinar that we have coming up next spring, is really your story. It starts with your elevator pitch, but it goes all the way through how you describe your military career, how you talk about the people that you've served with, how you talk about and articulate your story and your vision to that employer so that they have a picture of where you're going and why they should want to be part of that journey with you. Your narrative is also what other people say about you. So when somebody refers you for a job opportunity or a promotion or just an introduction, are they describing you as a fun guy? Or are they describing you as an innovative problem solver who mentors people around him? There's a big difference in the value proposition of those two referrals. The people that you build relationships with out in the community, in your industry, in your job search, how do they describe you? Do they describe you as depressed? Do they describe you as uplifting? That narrative and what the words that they use are powerful, because that's oftentimes what an employer is going to hear before they meet you. Networking, as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about that early next year in a webinar focused on networking in person and online. Our relationships. Who do you know? Who do you need to know? How do you get to know those people? In person, how do you walk up to someone and introduce yourself? In an online forum, how do you start having offline conversations and take it from a LinkedIn connection to a coffee meeting and possibly a job offer? That's how networking works. And networking is not all about you. It's just as much about me as it is about you. And we're going to talk about how to build networks using a win-win strategy for building your personal brand. Your image has a lot to say about who you are. And next spring, we're going to have a webinar just focused on image and body language, because you might look fantastic on paper and your LinkedIn profile and your mini website, your Pinterest and Facebook accounts might be just stellar. But if I meet you in person and there's something inconsistent about the way you present yourself, then the mind goes to skepticism. And presenting yourself in a civilian job environment is very different than the military, because we don't have uniforms. There's no standard dress code. In my book, I even talk about this concept of business casual, which honestly, it throws off civilians as much as it does you. But there's no uniform. There's no consistency in any industry. So we're going to talk a lot about what's appropriate, what's intentional. How do you show up in a way that tells that hiring manager, that interviewer, you are ready to go to work right now, and show respect for the interview process at the same time. We're going to talk about body language. Think about your body language over the next couple months as you sort of digest the contents of this webinar. What are you saying with your eye contact? Are you looking people in the eyes as you talk to them? Or are you kind of looking down as you make a conversation? Is your handshake firm and confident? Or is it that weak handshake that makes us all kind of creeped out? Do you walk into a room with your head held high and your shoulders back, even though you might be nervous as can be? You want to show body language that is consistent with who you believe and who you want to be in the future. That's why that desired brand is so important. You might be feeling a little insecure right now in a job search, and I get that, but you need to project confidence. An employer doesn't want to see someone who's insecure. They want to see someone who's confident and compassionate and approachable. We're going to talk a lot about the online space because using these online tools in a strategic way is one of the most powerful gifts you can give yourself. Employers are looking online for job candidates, candidates from executive level all the way down to entry level, to from landscaping architects and warehouse managers to executive managers in Fortune 500 companies. They are looking online, and how you show up online is really important to what that hiring manager or recruiter believes to be true about you. So in wrapping up, and then I'm going to address some of the questions that have been posted, you have a personal brand, every single one of you. And that brand is the same whether you're wearing a uniform or not. You're going to express it differently when you're out of uniform. Your brand is who you are. It isn't tied to your job title. Your values, your beliefs, your passion, your goals as a human being are what your brand represents. Whether you wear a uniform in military or in your job, your brand is who you are. You want to relate your military experience to your civilian pursuits. You don't leave your military career at the door when you take that uniform off and separate or retire. You are still the person who has been trained in those values and those skills. But that employer doesn't understand what that means. Remember, there are 1% of the American population are you. 99% of the American population are people like me who have not served, have no connection to the military. So you need to make it easy for us to understand what makes you valuable. Don't forget that desired brand, that focus on who you want to be in the future. You're going to make missteps. You're going to take the wrong job. You're going to do things that take you out of alignment, and that's okay. We're human beings. We're going to make mistakes. But if you can stay focused on who you want to be at the end of your life, you'll pull yourself back onto the path that will reward you with that reputation that you desire. Your reputation is everything. Your reputation, when it's solid and clear and compelling, will overcome those missteps, will help people want to take a chance on you, will help people want to fight for you and advocate for you and share and celebrate with you. But your reputation is valuable. Your word is valuable. Who you align with, who you associate with, the causes that you advocate for are all tied to your reputation. And you need to be mindful and very focused on how that is expressed in person and online. I want to thank my friends at the VFW for allowing me to bring this conversation to you. I am honored to be part of this community as a civilian who is dedicated to expressing her skills and talents by sharing her information with you. I do this because I am grateful for your service, for the service of your family and the commitment of your spouse and your children and everyone else who supported you. And I am that person who says thank you for your service to our country and to ensuring my freedom. There are a million ways you can stay in touch with me. I am very active online, so pretty much every platform. On Facebook, I have a page called Your Next Mission Book, where we share a lot of information and tools and tips about personal branding specific to the military veteran. I know that our friends at the VFW have a wonderful page that you should connect with as well. It's facebook.com/ at VFW fans. I'm sorry, I had to look that one up. A lot of good conversation happening around transition, around access to resources, and around the beautiful and powerful advocacy work that your VFW is doing to make sure that they stand with and represent every veteran who's ever put on the uniform. This is your VFW, and I am honored that I've been invited to help bring information like this to you. I also want to remind you that we have webinars coming up on different aspects of personal branding. Around the first of the year, we're going to be talking about working your network in person and online. We're going to talk a lot about social media in that webinar. Around the March-April timeframe, we're going to talk more about narrative, the elevator pitch, keywords. How do you make your resume stand out using specific keywords and terms that employers want to hear? And then just before summer, we're going to talk about your image and body language in around June. So stay tuned for information on those webinars. We've got some great articles coming out about transition, reintegration, that are also going to help employers understand what value a veteran brings to the conversation. I'm going to hand it back to my friends at the VFW as I look at some of the questions that have come in. So if we need to end the recording, we can certainly do that at this time. My name is Lita Citroen, and I thank you so much for your time today. All right, so I want to look at some of the comments. You have a military type haircut. Oh, you know, how you present yourself. This question came in from one of our viewers about how you present yourself. Honestly, I raised my kids with a military haircut, and I hope nobody confused my 7- and 8-year-olds with having served time in our country. But you know, those are subtleties, and whether it's your haircut or it's the way that you present yourself, it's about showing that employer that you're going to fit in. And that might mean looking at their culture, looking at the dress code, looking at how other people present themselves, and modeling your style a little bit more in that direction. Always staying true to who you are. There are many ways you can have a very short, very well-groomed haircut and still not look too military. Looking at another question. Yes, you really can't suppress who you are. Somebody says they went to a job fair and think veterans don't know how to dress is a big problem. Absolutely. Job fairs are really tricky because, again, there's no uniform. I would say anytime you go to a job fair, approach it strategically. Who are the companies you want to meet? You're not going to be handing out 50 resumes and hoping somebody calls you. So let's say there are 5 companies at that job fair you really want to meet. Let's say they're all big aerospace firms. Well, learn what their company culture looks like. What are they probably going to be dressed like? And then you dress one notch above. So if they typically would go to work in jeans and a t-shirt, and you come in a formal business suit, you probably look like you wouldn't fit in. But if they're in dress slacks, a sports jacket, and no tie, then wearing a suit is one notch above what they are wearing. I always advise going one notch above. And making sure that you dress like yourself. The challenge is if you go to a job interview wearing a suit and you get the job and then you have to wear a suit every day and you can't stand wearing a suit, did you set yourself up for success or failure? Because you're going to know how you're most comfortable dressing, right? Do you like to go to work in jeans and a t-shirt? There are a lot of industries and a lot of companies. That's how people dress. So think about those things. And we're going to have a whole webinar on image and dress, and I will take these questions into account. Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, well, a lot of you are asking some really good questions, and you're answering your own. That's fantastic. Do I feel that the transition program is beneficial? With all transparency, I teach in the Transition Assistance Program at the Air Force Academy, and I have for many years. I know that when I talk about personal branding, we're getting larger and larger followings. I don't know that it's being talked about in the same way that it could be. And I think that was possibly why when I brought this conversation up nationally, it really took off. Because a lot of that transition program is designed to help you in many ways, right? Financial assistance, setting up benefits, setting up housing, understanding how to navigate some of the online job search tools, how to translate your background and write a resume, set up a LinkedIn profile. It's a lot to cover in a very short period of time. So I would love to do more with the transition programs because I do know that there is proof, there is history that the transition program with an understanding of what we've talked about today really makes somebody a successful candidate to go into the marketplace. Here's a question. I've been told time and again by employers they are looking for OEF and OIF post 9/11. I'm puzzled by this. You know, I would question with those employers if they understand what it means, because there's a different veteran, and I say this with all sincerity and respect. Someone who signed up after 9/11 versus someone who served in peacetime or Vietnam era or Desert Storm might bring some different passion, a different level of passion, a different level of service to the civilian employer. And I think there's a sexiness to post 9/11. And I would question those employers and ask them what it is about that community of military veteran that they see as different. Because I find a tremendous passion in our Vietnam era veterans, in our peacetime veterans, in our Desert Storm veterans. That level of commitment and service is the same, but there's a perception somehow that it's different in post 9/11. And maybe that has to do with media. Maybe it has to do with the advent of social media. Um, but I don't run into that myself as much as I do the perception issue. So I hope that answers your question. Um, I know that we're running out of time, and I think I have answered the questions. I'm trying to see. But feel free to reach out to me on Facebook or through the VFW. And again, I want to thank my friends at our VFW in Kansas City for bringing this program together. And I will see you next time as we bring more tools and resources, information, and insight about the branding process to you. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.